Reporters Without Borders, and I'm really starting to hate any organization that is X without borders, although most of them are from France, so it's not that surprising. Have recently basically did this not organization, but have organized together with Avaz, which is a American journalist non-profit organization, to coordinate on September 1st, which is today, to do this big campaign against Israel and against sort of supposed suppression of journalistic freedom by Israel. There was a document that I've seen different things. I'm not sure if this specific document was leaked because this sort of event was known publicly, but sort of what was written in the document about how it's going to be done, I'm not sure if that was public or if that was leaked, but we will read through it anyway, since I think there are some interesting things to comment on. Later, I also found that a Guardian actually joined this, and they've made their own well, sort of like news on that, so we might check out that. And generally, I think we'll talk about this organization, Reporters Without Borders, and generally how their criteria for free journalism. So this is the topics for today. Welcome to the reality show. Joining me today are Marco, Richard, and Jonathan Daon. Thank you guys for joining me. And so I want to go and read the document. But before that, any opening thoughts? Let me start with Marco.
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, it's the Sans Frontier thing is where is Medicine or this one? It's a French, mainly French organization, and we know where the French stand when it comes to anti-Semitism. They've been hardly hiding the anti-Semitism lately. What's more pernicious, I think, is the fact that the people behind them, if you just look on the website and see who's the president who are on the board of this vehicle of terrorism propaganda, it's ex-socialist or socialist or people who were writing for socialist press, magazines like what's this called? I can't remember now. It starts with A. Sorry, Liberation, that's the
Right.
one. So it's not a surprise that a bunch of leftists who pretend to be impartial then come out on the other side saying, "Oh, look at Israel, they're so bad. The poor Palestinians are not allowed to defend themselves. They're just resisting civilization." Well, they wouldn't say resisting civilization. We say that, but they say that they're resisting the nasty Israelis. Again, it's hardly a surprise. What is a surprise, and to be honest, not even a surprise that, but what is annoying is that in the West we apply the principles that we found, if you like, natural or accepted in society, and we apply them willy-nilly to the Middle East. We're talking here about Hamas, about Palestine, about a group of Arabs whose culture is stuck back in the Middle Ages. So to even expect having a journalism which is such, which is a journalism which requires to be free, is asking too much of them. They have propaganda because they haven't got any idea of freedom. They don't see a human being as free, independent, sovereign individuals, but they see them within the context of the collective. So you're either a servant of the gods, or you're a servant of the people, or you're a servant of the racial group, or whatever, which is, incidentally, the same ideology that comes from the left. The left sees people as parts of the collective. So that's why there is the one-to-one relationship between the Palestinians and the extreme left, especially the super hardcore socialist, who sees the Palestinian struggle the same as the working class struggle. The working class is oppressed by the owners. The Palestinians are oppressed by the Israelis, and so they act out in the same way by denying the purpose and the whole point behind human life, which is the requirement for freedom in order to prosperity. They just ignore that and they keep going on with the same Marxist ideology, just applied to different people. So yeah, it's not a surprise that a bunch of lefties are going against after Israel.
Yeah, I mean, technically, this is a leak we're hearing here, and we're seeing behind the curtain as to how these groups get together in order to promote Hamas propaganda across multiple media outlets and in 50 countries at once. But it's kind of, you're seeing behind the curtain, but it's sort of a see-through curtain to start with, since we can see what's going on every day of the week, quite honestly, can't we? With just the way in which the output is delivered and the uniformity of a single message you hear all the time, regardless of the truth. So that's no surprise. And as you say, yeah, it's a French organization. I mean, you don't need to, although I'm tempted to say you should never listen to anyone French. I do have some objectivist French friends who ruin that point. So yeah, it's not the fact they're French that's a problem, although that is a red flag in many ways. But they're also teamed up with an organization called Avaz or Avars. I don't know. Maybe that's how you pronounce it. I don't know. But anyway, either way, it means voice. And again, it's a lefty voice. It's the voice which is designed to rile up lefties everywhere with the standard techniques of online petitions, direct action, general agitation galore, on every sort of subject, from climate change to rattling the cage about why Israel's the demon on earth.
Oof, somebody in the chat says, "Is Marco not French?" Oh, that must stink. But Jonathan, any opening thoughts from you?
Yes, thank you. Great to be here. I think I'll give more of the higher level thing that is really, I think, the root of this whole idea about freedom of propaganda, really, that people are like Piers Morgan, for example, have been on a crusade regarding this issue for as long as the war has been on. I don't know how many clips of him have you shown him, but I'm sure many. And he likes to say that let the international journalists go and we'll verify if Israel is correct, as if they are the source of credibility. But the issue is that you don't get to launch a war and then have rights to free press, or really a rights to anything. The fact that you launched a war, that is the violation of your own rights to anything. You don't get to claim also food as we provide them. You don't get to claim to have a freedom to spread propaganda. You don't have any of that. That's just illegitimate. And the fact that this is even going on is part of Israel's refusal to acknowledge the fact that there is no separation between the people in Gaza and the so-called Hamas. It is one and the same. There is no, in as much as there was no NGOs, as far as I know, there were no Western NGOs operating in Nazi Germany during World War II, trying to protect free press or whatever nonsense. I just don't know of some. I'd love for somebody to share with me if something like that happened. It's just ridiculous. This is a war. You don't get to do also boat convoys into a war zone. You don't get to bring food into this war zone. Frankly, dear West, this is none of your business. This is our war. What are you trying to meddle in this affair? How is this even of your concern? So they all these organizations should have been gone packing home a long time ago. And the fact that this is even going on to this state is all on Israel's fault. Why is this right-wing government allowing this to happen? That will be my number one question. So it's just ridiculous, the whole situation.
Yeah, and so as you have mentioned, the main purpose of this campaign is to is to allow journalists into Gaza, which again, it's like there are journalists in Gaza. They can go into Gaza if they want. They just won't go through the Israeli side. And of course, even IDF allows journalists to go into Gaza, as many have already gone. But let's read from the actual document that was leaked. Again, the purpose of this was basically to coordinate actions between different newspapers about sort of about sort of like a unifying message that would be put out. So let's read from this. It has 3 sections, so and it has a bit more stuff, but we'll just read these three sections. So it starts. For 23 months, the Israeli authorities have refused to grant journalists outside of Gaza independent access to the Palestinian territory, a situation that is without a precedent in modern warfare. Local journalists, those best positioned to tell the truth, face displacement and starvation. To date, at least 210 journalists have been killed by the Israeli military. Many have been injured and face constant threats to their lives for doing their jobs. Bearing witness. This is a direct attack on press freedom and the right to information. More info, and then they post to links to the Reporters Without Borders about this. And I mean, Marco, they talk about 210 journalists. They talk about how the war has been going on. And that this is a direct attack on press freedom and the right to information. But again, as Jonathan said, this is war. We are not dealing with some civil disobedience or something where you respect you are trying to, or some right or something where yes, you are trying to control the situation, but you still recognize that the people who you're dealing with have rights. The fact is, the Palestinians have defaulted on any sort of rights when they started this war. What is this kind of like respect for, I mean, anything, no, let alone this journalistic freedom, whatever it means?
Yeah, well, you're right. I mean, the problem that these kind of pieces are pure propaganda for Hamas, for the side which committed October 7th, and the side that would like to see the end of Israel as a state and the death of every single Jew left on the planet. I mean, don't just listen to what I'm telling you. Just read and listen to what they themselves say. I mean, on one side they tell you, oh, there are no free journalists in Gaza. But just the other day, due to a cock-up of the IDF, a hospital was hit twice at 4 or 5 minutes distance, and a journalist from Reuters, you would argue that Reuters is a fairly free agency, was killed. So if a Reuters journalist is killed in Gaza, it means that journalists are allowed to get into Gaza. So you can't have both things. And this is one of the kind of contradiction that these pro-savages are actually holding all the time. And then what they call about local journalists. Well, first of all, local journalists in Gaza are just mouthpieces for Hamas, which makes them terrorists. So there isn't a local journalism in Gaza. There cannot possibly be journalism in Gaza because Gaza is not a free nation. It's a theocratic, racist culture. So they don't have freedom. Therefore, all they have is propaganda. And so local journalism in Gaza is local propaganda, propaganda from the terrorists of Hamas, propaganda for the Palestinian cause. And we all know the Palestinian cause is effectively is the stuff created by the terrorists from Egypt, Arafat in the 60s, who created this kind of made up state and ethnicity. So everything that comes out of Gaza is lies. The numbers of the deaths is lies. The people involved and the fact that they are trying to make peace with Israel is a lie. We've seen it over and over again. So in my eyes, this document, whatever it says after, is delegitimized because they're starting with a premise which is wrong. And knowing the kind of people who are actually making these reports, making this kind of accusations, you cannot take them seriously. So you cannot continue and go on with this kind of propaganda and come out on the side of the theocrats, of the people who want the end of civilization.
Yeah.
Yeah, and sorry, just to bring in one quick thing, and we'll talk about the Nasser hospital incident. But just to bring in one more thing about sort of the Reporters Without Borders and sort of their focus. So this is from their official website where basically they have like a ranking of every single country of sort of their press freedom. And here is an entry for Israel. Press freedom, media plurality, and editorial independence have been increasingly restricted in Israel since the start of the war in Gaza, launched by Israel on 7. Why does it say launched by Israel? Oh, okay. The war was launched by Israel following the deadly Hamas attack. I didn't even notice this the first part.
Well, it's a bit like saying that the Allies caused the Second World War, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, launched by the Allied forces after the attack by Germany. But anyway, just reading a bit more. Close to 200 journalists were killed in 18 months in Gaza by the IDF. So this was entry for Israel. Here is entry for Palestine, in quotes. Well, they don't put it in quotes, I do. Palestine has become the world's most dangerous state for journalists, as almost 200 reporters were killed by Gaza by the Israeli military over the first 18 months of war. So, press freedom is bad in Israel because of Israel. Press freedom is bad in Palestine because of Israel. What kind of like rhetoric or what kind of even like way of judging a country or a supposed country is this?
Yeah, absolutely. And I didn't look down that list because it seemed like it was completely arbitrary in the first place and completely pointless. But I suspect, I mean, what did it put Israel at? 112 or something?
112
yeah.
out of 180.
Yes, and I wonder, what kind of nations were put ahead of it, and how many of those were, of the theocratic dictatorial type, because I'm sure that, but by no means,
Qatar.
yeah, Qatar, yeah, home of Al Jazeera, of course, yeah. I looked at,
And I'm not joking. Qatar is 79. So about 30 places above Israel.
yeah, which is why that entire list should be shoved in the bin or the shredder, quite honestly, isn't it? When you looked at some of the signatories for this group who've these journalists that have signed up to this, or organisations that have signed up to this or given their support to it, they include quite a few interesting ones. I just focus on the UK ones because they're big players. The BBC CEO of BBC News, for example, an editor in the Financial Times, the editor-in-chief of The Guardian and The Independent, both left-wing newspapers, despite being called The Independent. But anyway, big newspapers nonetheless. And the chief executive of Independent Television News, ITN, which is our main commercial news channel that sits as a rival to the BBC. So that shows how screwed the UK is, doesn't it? When even the commercial rival of the BBC is peddling the same line as the BBC. And then when you looked at what some of them have done with this, I checked out The Guardian because someone's got to, and it came up with this line within it. It had an article called "The Deadly Toll on Journalists in the Gaza War," which is their article for today with its ominous pictures and whatnot. It said within it, or the headline quote from it was, "With foreign media barred, Palestinians have reported alone, facing the most deliberate effort to kill and silence them ever." That was the the Guardian's technique, because they were obviously calling really it was a plea for more catastrophic Hamas propaganda to be foisted on the world, quite honestly. And with no state of irony, the next article underneath this was an article on The Guardian called "Why More and More People Are Tuning the News Out." Because of the emotional toll of constant negative news and doom scrolling. So, they're calling for more catastrophic Hamas propaganda, but people don't actually want it because they've had enough, frankly. I think that's the gist of it.
Yeah, and something you didn't mention about the wait, did you mention the BBC? Did you
I
or
did,
The Guardian? Oh, okay. So the one I've seen was the article that you've mentioned. Was that The Guardian or BBC?
It was The Guardian, that particular.
Okay, Guardian. So something you didn't mention about the Guardian article that it before even the title, it has the names of all the supposed journalists that were killed. Underneath, it has a list then of all of them, and under that, it has a picture with like a collage of every single one of them. So it mentions like every single thing 3 times.
And it tries to present it, doesn't it, in a manner which makes it look like the hit list that Israel produces for Hamas leadership, as if it's a targeted effort, which it is in the case where journalists are clearly Hamas terrorists doubling up in the first place.
Yeah, and I mean to go to you, Jonathan, if you want to comment on something we've said, but also I want to bring in specifically the Nasser hospital story, because as always, IDF has to prove me wrong. When we talked about it originally, I said, Israel takes care. I think, unfortunately, when it comes to, for every strike you have a lawyer, and every strike is approved. And of course, this one time I mentioned it, of course, apparently there was as I think Richard or Marco said earlier, a cock-up where it wasn't. And that is now being put against Israel. The fact that they didn't talk to lawyers before doing a specific strike. Who else has even that sort of like standard to begin with? The fact is, somebody was killed who I think was properly targeted and was supposed to be gone. But again, it's still a problem.
Yeah, I mean, the worst thing about that whole incident was Netanyahu's apology. That was the most immoral thing about this whole incident. And yeah, people might get upset. I don't care. And Israel shouldn't care. Israel should do its only obligation, which is to protect its citizens in whatever ways it seems most appropriate. And if that hospital had people worth being targeted, worth the ammunition that was thrown at them, worth the money that taxpayers paid for that, then by all means attack that hospital, attack whatever a military target they come up with. But before this, I think that this freedom of press thing is still interesting. If you notice, they don't these Palestinians or these allies of the Palestinians, they only care about freedom only when it comes to attacking the Jews. The Palestinians want freedom of press when it is used as part of their propaganda war against Israel. I mean, do they have freedom of press in Palestine? Can a journalist criticize Hamas in Gaza? Can they say that maybe he disagrees a little bit with the murder of gays in Gaza? Maybe he disagrees with the communist economic policy. Whatever. Can anybody disagree with anything in Gaza before the war? And now, can anybody disagree with October 7th? Can anybody say, hey, we shouldn't have kidnapped all these Israelis and murdered all these people? Maybe we shouldn't have done that. I don't see them arguing about freedom of press to do that. Whereas Israel, by the way, has one of the, I think, really most free press. You get like all day. What the press does is criticize the government. Like if you tune into the Israeli news, what they talk about all day is how much Netanyahu sucks and we should surrender and we should give up and do basically what all the nice people in the chat want us to do. So that's just, if you want freedom of press, surrender, give up, and you'll have the freest press in the world. Israel is a free, liberal democracy. So if you really care about that, you should be against the Palestinians and for Israel. But it's obvious that they're not really for free press. They're just against Israel. And they see it as a useful tactic, as they cite all these things, when they cite the Geneva Convention, when they cite all these international laws and the committees and the United Nations, all that nonsense, only when it has to do with moving their purpose, which is destroying the Jewish state. So it's all a lie and a nonsense, and we shouldn't even take it seriously.
Yeah, and I wanted to read a little bit more from this document, but actually that's a good switch to actually go to the methodology they actually use for determining a free press in different countries. Now, for my understanding, the way Reporters Without Borders do so is they have a questionnaire that they go to a specific country and they gather a bunch of different journalists, media specialists, like professionals in the field, and all of them get asked, get this questionnaire. They answer everything, and then it's basically math is used to basically average it out, or basically to get a certain answer out of it, and that gets converted into a specific number, and based on those numbers, all countries are ranked. Now they have 5 categories for the so-called press freedom, meaning political, legal, economic, socio-cultural, and safety. I think if I understand, legal is coming specifically from the law. Political is sort of the way politicians act towards news. Economic is straight up like, can the country even support such thing as like news organization? Socio-cultural is general sort of like culture. And safety means, so our journalists getting killed or targeted. But they if you go through the questions, some are okay. I think I found something like, what degree of autonomy from political authorities do the following leaders have? And it's sort of like, do politicians go after journalists? Which in some cases it really depends how you even define journalist. Because I think one of the questions there was something like, are laws against terrorism, separatism, and or extremism abusively used against journalists? Well, if the people we are talking about, like the people who were on October 7 in Israel and were considered journalists, if those are considered journalists, then yeah, technically laws against terrorism in Israel are being used against journalists, if this is how you define journalism. And this is sort of like a problem you might start to see with these questions. So I'll go to you guys, but I'll throw a few more questions they have in this questionnaire. So one was, are journalist sources subjected to physical or moral intimidation? Which is also like a really weird, like, what does moral intimidation like means? Like, I think sort of like the biggest thing that is happening here is sort of this confusion between sort of like public and private, right? It's free media, instead of free media focusing on, is the government censoring media, it's focusing on basically things like, are citizens forced to pay taxes and then have no control over that public media? Because again, countries like United Kingdom, the northern countries, are considered as the most free. Marco, any comments?
I mean, I read those bits of the first page about the methodology, and none of these actually, if you think about it, apply to Gaza or the Palestinian Authority, because there's no freedom of criticize, as Jonathan mentioned earlier on. There's no freedom in Gaza to criticize Hamas. If you do that, you're disappeared. You're probably found dead in a ditch. There is no degree of freedom which is sufficient to warrant for journalism in Gaza or as a matter of fact, in most of the Middle East. Apart from Israel, nobody else is a free state. Nobody else allows plurality of opinions. Nobody else allows the alphabet people, for example, to even exist. There is, as far as I know, a gay pride in Tel Aviv. There isn't one in Gaza, or there isn't one in Cairo. There isn't one in Qatar, that's for sure. However, these people seem to be particularly bothered by the fact that Israel is not perfect, ignoring the fact that everywhere else, all around Israel, for hundreds and thousands of miles all around Israel, women are second-class citizens, gays are killed. You haven't got any way for to support anything which goes against Islam. You cannot be a different even religion and without some degree of persecution. So I mean, really, are we nitpicking on the imperfect system that Israel has in order to favor the worst dictatorship on the planet, the worst tyrants, the worst theocracies? And for what? Just to push this kind of call for return to the Middle Ages. This is just outrageous. And again, to chime what Jonathan was talking about earlier on, Israel should have been much more selfish about their actions. Should have done exclusively what saves lives of Israeli people. I mean, I think today 900 soldiers have died since October the 7th in this war. 900 soldiers. For a small state like Israel, that's a massive number. 1,300 were slaughtered by Hamas, and 900 people died because Israel is too scared to actually take the actions that are required by a state to protect its own citizens. Really, Israel should just bomb Gaza wherever there is a terrorist group, wherever there is a terrorist equipment. And by the way, if it happens to be bombing a hospital or a school or a UN facility, it's always because there is some terrorist material, weapons, or people in there. So it's not like, it's a choice that Israel attacks civilian infrastructure. The point is that Gazans, Palestinians, use civilian infrastructure as a cover, use their own civilians as a propaganda machine, really. Which, if you're really worried about freedom of press, you should also point out that breaks the Geneva Convention. You cannot use hospitals and schools and civilian facilities to stash your missiles and your terrorist groups. But these people are so worried about journalism, but they never made these points. They never picked up the fact that Gaza, Hamas, the Palestinian Authority, and all these kind of savages use on purpose civilian facilities, and they fight in civilian clothing. So, talk about biased report, isn't it?
And none of what Marco
Sorry,
said.
just to throw in one quick thing. One question I didn't mention was: do public service or state media outlets cover all political views? And I think it had a few things when it comes to like plurality of opinions. And I'm wondering, when Russia Today was banned in many Western countries, if that increased their freedom index or decreased their freedom index, because I think it was a very good thing to do.
Yeah. I was just going to make the point that none of what Marco said there is to underestimate or undervalue the bravery of those 900 Israeli soldiers either. It's the situation the leadership has put them in, and the principles upon which the fighting and the decisions about how the war is fought are taken place. That is the real issue there. I think one of the confusions underneath this whole story and how people look at the press is that when journalists are in countries like Britain are complaining about other journalists and other countries and how they operate their media, one of the things that journalists here in the UK have is such a one viewpoint largely, that they don't have the variety of views that are necessary to represent different opinions. And many of those journalists actually want to suppress alternative views. You see that within the UK for the attitudes of all of these main media to new organizations like GB News, for example, where they're constantly trying to encourage people to defund it through encouraging advertisers to remove their advertising from it, or to encourage the regulator Ofcom to fine them or crush them out of existence. So a lot of it is actually about the suppression of an alternative view. And if you take, you picked out the phrase, Daniel, in that of moral intimidation. I think one of the problems is when people are quoting morality, they're often badging it up with altruism. They're treating altruism as equivalent to, as meaning the only form of morality. And therefore, when altruism is questioned, they consider morality is questioned, when actually the morality of altruism is what we need to question in the first place. And that's one of the key problems here, because all of these journalists have an altruistic attitude, a big state attitude, and frankly, the sans frontières element of it is a one world viewpoint, where they want a one world set of altruism and big state essentially behind what they're arguing for. So I think all of that's in this for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, when you mention sort of like GB News, like I would, I mean, as long as the sort of the calling, well, now if the employers of the BBC are calling for it, that's problematic, since that is a state, sort of a state employees. But if like a private people call for like, hey, don't sell advertising to this company, I don't like it. For me, that's still freedom, right? This is what freedom means. But according to their standard, this is not freedom, because this is the moral intimidation. This is the sort of, trying to destroy the plurality of opinions by, because they extend they have this weird confusion, or not confusion. They basically don't view the difference between government and private things. So your boss telling you of a private company telling you to do something or write a certain story is viewed as the same thing as like the government coming to you and telling you to not publish a certain story or write a certain way.
And that intimidation has an effect. Sorry, I just wanted to cut in with a quick point. That intimidation has an effect on how journalists are able to report. For example, I'm not saying GB News is perfect by any means, but when GB News, presenters and journalists go to some of these pro-Palestinian marches and groups for Palestine Action or whatever, and try and get them to talk and just say why they're there and things like that, they get totally blocked and intimidated and sometimes, frankly, assaulted. And that's been a result of the riling up and the intimidation and the pressure that is exerted by so many voices, all acting as a mob, which is saying all of us are individual voices, they pretend to be, but they act as a unified mob in order to try and extinguish the existence and the ability for an organization that should have a right to broadcast to go about its work.
Jonathan?
I mean, I feel like we've said everything really about this this issue. I mean, these organizations. I think we have to understand, if we haven't yet, all these organizations, they exist. Their whole funding, their whole reason they survive is because of our sanction. We like, they put up this freedom index according to their arbitrary standards, whatever they make it up. I can also make up some standards for objective journalism, say that this is the standard for objective journalism, and of course Israel is the worst violator of it, and let's obsess over it. I don't buy that this is an organization about freedom of journalism. It sounds like just another wing of this propaganda war against Israel. The very fact that they're obsessed about this, and I just don't see any other matter of concern to them. Is not that I really know about this, or not that I really care. But this is just why should we even bother? They will always be against Israel, no matter what. No matter what, they're clearly not thinking people. They're clearly not about truth. They're just a wing of the Palestinian war against freedom of press, against liberty, against individual rights. If they were for any of these things, they would have at least done some thinking, if they can use their brains and see that there is a reason why there is a problem with allowing international journalists to come into Gaza, because it is just a little bit of a war zone started by this monstrous government that runs this territory called Gaza. Their representatives have done it, and their people. They've all participated in this massive cultural eruption event that was the October 7th massacre. We saw what their culture is about at full scale, and this is not a Hamas war. I think we have to stop using the word Hamas. This is a Palestinian war of annihilation against the Jews, and everything else that comes from that is a result of Israel's inability to do what is necessary, to even recognize who the enemy is and act in the decisive way that this situation necessitates. Every military target that is not being targeted because of our subscription to these various international conventions, laws, all that rubbish, whilst our own soldiers are sacrificing their lives, is a moral crime, and the blood of our heroic soldiers who die needlessly in the pursuit of pleasing the anti-Semites, pleasing our worst enemies. These people are criminals, and they should be dealt with in a justice system. If we had real justice in Israel, that is what we should have been outraged about. That is the real issue.
Yeah, and I want to read a little bit more from the document, but first somebody said in the chat that what was it specifically? Just so Gaza has one of the highest literacy rates in the world. I'm wondering what was the literacy rate of the black people in South Africa, in apartheid South Africa. I'm sure it was also high, since Gaza is also apparently apartheid. So you might, if you look it up, you might be surprised to find out. Might not exactly be the case. But let's read a little bit more from the document. I think I'll read just until the end. It's just, I think, like 2 paragraphs. In response, media outlets, press freedom organizations, and journalists around the world are joining forces on Monday, September 1st. In a world first, around 150 media outlets from some 50 countries, alongside journalists and press freedom organizations, will unite to demand that Israel open Gaza's borders for international journalists to be able to report freely, and that Israel abides by its international obligations to protect journalists as civilians. And then it has a unified message, quote, "At the rate journalists are being killed in Gaza by the Israeli army, there will soon be no one to left to keep you informed. Hashtag protect journalists in Gaza. Hashtag let reporters in Gaza." So yeah, as I think Jonathan mentioned earlier with somebody like Piers Morgan, who had this obsession of like, just let journalists into Gaza. Again, I don't even want to give in to the premise of like Israel should let journalists into Gaza, because it's putting Israel, like, what does it even mean to like in this document it says it should protect the journalists in Gaza. Well, what does that mean? Like, when journalists go into Gaza, IDF is with them to make sure they are protected. How can
If I
yeah,
may,
sure.
if I may, this is really vile, and I'm really, like, they use Israel's real sacredness to life. The Israelis know very well what will happen to these journalists if they are let in. They know very well, and if we were on the level of our enemies, we would have let them in, because then the whole world would have seen what will happen to them. We would have let Greta in, which I think we might as well do. We would have let all these circus, we would let all that into Gaza and see what would happen, and show the world and talk about how much this is a Hasbara win or whatever. But we don't do that, because maybe we are too nice to our enemies. We don't want to take them too seriously. I guess is the issue, and they should really thank Israel for that. If they're really that stupid, I guess the reason they are going on about it, they know nobody will let them in, because I want to see their faces, and when they're getting the message, okay, your visa is approved, this is your ticket to Gaza, good luck. I just don't think many people would actually jump on the opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, and again, let's assume like hundreds of them going to Gaza. Now, some of them will get killed even by Israel if they're let in. Like Israel cannot like make sure that they don't hit every single one. They cannot make watch out for them. And again, what if Hamas captures one of those journalists and puts them into their HQ or where they keep bombs? Well, now Israel cannot like attack. Well, that is the standard Israel is put at, right? As soon as Hamas throws in a civilian at some hospital or at some school where they're holding weapons, well, suddenly this is getting like this is like a game where basically it gets like a buff, and now Israel no longer can attack it. I mean, Marco, any?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
that's part of the issue, isn't it? You have to remember this is a situation of war. It's a theater of war. You cannot allow people to enter, having people crawling all over it. And then if there is an accident, it's your fault, obviously. It's Israel's fault if somebody get hurt. And it does, leaving aside the fact that terrorists wear press jackets just to add to the accusations, and letting aside that journalists have been found to be part of the Hamas crew, even going into October the 7th slaughter activities. Letting aside that journalists were found holding hostages. We ignore all that, but you cannot also give documents to people, okay, get into Gaza, and then if you're hurt, or as Jonathan mentioned, if you are kidnapped, whose fault is it? Who benefits from the propaganda from it? Hamas, doesn't it? And frankly, it would be the same as allowing. You mentioned Greta, the bride of Chucky, to enter Gaza with aids for the enemies of Israel. I mean, which other state would allow their enemies to be aided by foreign intervention? It's insane that Israel should even consider seriously letting journalists. They are there, as we mentioned earlier on. A Reuters guy died there because they clearly go in anyway. So it's just ridiculous to hold Israel to this kind of standards and effectively ask Israel to contribute to its own destruction. Just the same way in which they tell people in Gaza, oh, we're about to bomb this area, please evacuate. No, you should say, everyone, we're going to bomb somewhere in Gaza. If you're nearby a terrorist or some terrorist equipment, move out of the way. That's the maximum of courtesy that should give. I wouldn't even give it that, but if you really wanted to do it, you could do it that without being specific. I'm gonna bomb this building. Everybody get out, because terrorists get out as well. What kind of counterproductive activity is that? Because you're more worried about the civilians of the savages that have been attacking you rather than your own troops, and that's unforgivable, frankly.
Yeah, and just to, I mean, a few more things. I mean, when it comes to sort of like letting them go in, again, if Israel had the moral sort of understanding of what it means to fight a war, it can let in. Like, yeah, there are stories of like American citizens going into Russia and then getting recruited into Russian army and getting killed in a war. And I'm like, dude, if you're so stupid that you actually like go to Russia and think that like you will come out okay, it's like I wanted to look up that specific story, and ChatGPT said that this guy was tragically killed, and I don't know what's tragic about it. It's an idiotic guy who went into Russia to fight for a nation. Like it's not like he went like before the war. He saw the war and then decided to go in. If there are journalists who see what's happening right now, an actual war going on in Gaza, and they think, oh, I should go in and report it. I mean, if you get killed, it's on you. What can I do? But I mean, somebody in the chat says, "Oh, they don't want to report on like the Gaza, the war crimes that Israel is committing." Like, so the pictures, supposed pictures we are seeing right now about the starvation and the war crimes and the killing of it. Why are we seeing that if we would see more of it, if like more of it would happen if there were war, or like what is the argument here? Like we are already seeing the supposed, like it's a live stream genocide. What's more than live stream genocide? So I don't understand this, like, oh, if you let the journalists go in, then we will really know about what's happening in Gaza. Oh, so we don't really know what's happening in Gaza right now?
Yeah, in
Like,
comparison, you could think about what's happened to Hong Kong. There used to be a anti-government movement in Hong Kong. It's being wiped out. I think a few months ago, China closed down the last independent news outlet. So, do they worry about this kind of stuff? No, because China, they can indulge in the kind of propaganda. They can indulge in close it down and any freedom of speech or of journalism. Russia can do the same, but hey, we just again use everything they can get a hold of in order to attack Israel. And we know perfectly well why, because they don't want Israel to succeed. They want the Marxist Islamist world to actually be, the big caliphate.
Meanwhile, of course, they deify people like Greta, who are the trained activists, trained by essentially exactly the kind of propaganda and consorted campaigns that we're talking about in terms of this league. I mean, I'm glad to see that she's actually been sent back to Spain, hasn't she, by the climate, which is it sounds like a good reason to fire up your V8 engines and take a petrol chainsaw to the woods if that's what's going to stop her. But yeah, the climate as a storm has stopped her from getting to Israel just yet. So that's delayed the news for another few weeks. I think what are some of the key things that also are relevant in terms of letting journalists into Gaza are like disclosing the troop movements of the IDF, for example. I mean, given how rabidly anti-Israel these journalists are, their ability to give out military information wittingly or unwittingly would be seriously damaging, and of course would raise the casualty numbers from those 900 IDF that we mentioned earlier to God knows how many if that were allowed. And of course, I mean, it's the Israeli High Court that's upheld this restriction, isn't it, on some journalists being able to restriction to some foreign journalists. I think there's a big judicial review coming up on that towards the end of October, the 23rd of October, when they're going to look at it again. But I think the message from the Israeli government and the IDF is quite clear that this is represents a security threat. At the moment, the circumstances don't make it possible. And when you're trying to actually, finish this war, and this is a phase when Israel is actually trying to do more of what we argue they should be doing in terms of, taking Gaza City and ensuring that the Hamas's last battalions are wiped out, or last groups of terrorists are wiped out, then the last thing you need is that scuppered by journalists from across the world with only the word journalist on them, but the activism being their primary motivator.
We have a super chat from Boy. Thank you so much. He says Greta's phone is sleeping with the fishes. Did she lose her phone? I didn't see that. I've seen some story around Greta that she was turned back, but I didn't see much more.
Next time she nears Israel coast, she herself should be sleeping with the fishes.
Something separate I wanted to bring up is again this sort of like free media during the state of war. I've read the book. I've made so many quotes from this book that this was probably the most profitable buy I ever did. But it was the March to the Sea, the Sherman's way of waging the Civil War, and he talked about sort of like the free press and or generally the press and the disdain he had for it because they reported on his movements. They were like publishing where he was going in like different areas. He considered them spies in that way. And yeah, when you have like I think specifically with the Nasser hospital, the IDF said that there was a guy on top of it, like recording the movements of the IDF forces, like right before one of the biggest operations. Of course, he was gonna get hit. Like this is not like I think the proper way of like doing this is if people still remember the Atlantic journalist that was invited into the Telegram group about the Houthi strike. He didn't publish it before the strike. He published it after the strike because he understood, okay, they might have broke the operational security by telling it to me, but I'm still not gonna tell it to everybody before the strike actually happens. So because he was sitting on that information. So this is what you actually do. Yeah, maybe sometimes news find out about information, about secret information of what the government is doing, and sometimes it's better to not publish it when it actually is dealing when you are actually having the when lives are at stakes of the soldiers and of the general security of the country. So again, people trying to ask sort of think that yeah, journalists in Gaza should simply publish everything about the IDF. Well, at some point, I mean, with most of them are Hamas terrorists anyway. But even with the sort of freelance free journalist in Gaza, if they start reporting on what the IDF is doing about the specific national security, yeah, something will happen. And if the strike is what needs to happen, if it's repeatable, this is Israel didn't choose to start this war. Jonathan, any last thoughts on this, and where can people find you?
Yeah, thank you. It's yeah, the whole Greta business I find very quite hysterical. But it is sad that our soldiers will have to waste time to go give her sandwiches. I mean, it really seems like our obsession is feeding people, which is perhaps comes from some sort of Ashkenazi anxiety. I wish the world had cared as much about journalism and genocides when real genocides were happening and are happening now. For example, stories about the Holocaust when it was ongoing were quite suppressed. It was politicians didn't want to acknowledge it. There was a whole thing about not acknowledging it, not attacking the railroads to Auschwitz. Um, I just wish we had these amazing NGOs who care so deeply about the truth back then. It's really quite an advancement. It seems that now we have all these beautiful organizations just caring so deeply about the truth and spreading their moral message. Of course, being cynical. Anyway, you can find me on philosophyinineedit.com. Link is in the description, I hope. I publish essays on a weekly basis, sometimes about Israel, sometimes about other matters.
Just quickly, somebody in the chat says, because war does have rules. Why do you think we have international court where people can and have been accused of convicted of war crimes?
Yeah.
Why do you think the Nazi leadership was hung? The reason why Nazi leadership was hung because all of Germany was conquered and they no longer could flee anywhere, and we decide what to do with it afterwards. They weren't hung because of some again and again, this is what Israel should do in Gaza. Yeah, put all the Hamas at what do we want to call Haifa trials, Gaza trials, whatever it
Should be
happens.
at the Nova Party site. That's where they should hang all these bastards.
Marco?
Yeah, that would be appropriate, wouldn't it? Well, what we're going to say, it's impossible to pretend that these people are interested in freedom of the press. Gaza and the Palestinians, in the first place, do not understand freedom. They do not care for democracy. They do not care for freedom in the first place. So to bang on about freedom of the press is just another way to attack Israel in a way that doesn't look like an attack on Israel. But that's all it is. These people are just worried about making sure that the only civilized country in the Middle East is destroyed and wiped out, because that's exactly what the Gazans have proposed to do, and they repeated and they've done over and over again for the last 80 years. So it's all this excuse, freedom of the press and this kind of stuff, it doesn't hold water. doesn't know water if anything else, because these people, this kind of, as I mentioned earlier on, more primitive, savage civilization do not understand the value of freedom. It's not an accident that the most prosperous societies are the societies where freedom is more available to citizens. That's why Israel, the freer country in the Middle East, is the wealthiest, is the richest, is the one with a plurality of views and plurality of religions and plurality of all sorts of um, um, you know minorities and things like that. So unless they understand that the freedom behind the prosperity of humans is the same freedom that comes from protecting the freedom, but they don't understand this. So there's no point complaining about the lack of freedom in Gaza, because they don't want it in the first place. All they're interested, because of the culture, is death, destruction, and certainly the elimination of the Jews.
And for my closing remarks, I'll just say that why do we need to let more journalists into Gaza when we have the likes of BBC Verify to tell us what's true and what are the salient essential facts in this story? I mean, take their coverage of BBC Verify looked at the NASA hospital incident and told us that there were 4 strikes on the hospital, not 2, 4. But admits within the article that the first 2 were simultaneous, and the second 2 were fractions of a second apart, which sounds like another word for simultaneous to me. But anyway, you're only supposed to remember that there were 4, and that the BBC Verify will tell you the truth, which is that Israel is twice as bad as all the other news outlets are telling you already how bad they are. So it's an absolute joke, frankly. I think in terms of where you can find us, check out the Briefly Objective, the sister channel to this, which is linked in the description below for shorter form material, where you can find lots of the key salient points that are relevant to this conflict.
Also, if Israel is striking the same place and is still hitting somebody, well, 2 strikes, shame on me. 3 strikes, shame on you. I mean, why are you still like going there if I'm like striking the same place? So, with that, Jonathan, did you tell where people can find you?
Yes, philosophyIneeded.com.
All right. With that, thank you guys for joining me today. Thank you everybody for watching, and we'll be back tomorrow with another episode of the Daily Objective and the reality show. Until then, bye bye.
Thank you.